then? There's a difference. What's going on here? Are the hypnotizables really experiencing less pain? Well, this question was further addressed by neo-dissociation, which somebody earlier mentioned, and the idea of a hidden observer. Hubbard was the one that came up with this, and he noticed there were intriguing parallels between hypnosis and other psychological conditions like multiple personality and fugue and hysterical amnesia. And it had been hypothesized in those kinds of disorders, memories that were normally connected with each other became disconnected or dissociated. A patient suffering from multiple personality disorder, for example, might exhibit 2 or more dissociated states of memories, one for each personality. This kind of hypnosis, he suggested, might be similar to what goes on, this idea of dissociation might be similar to what goes on in hypnosis. Okay. And the idea of the hidden observer that we'll get to on the next slide gives a good example of that. Now, neo-dissociation theory is kind of building on the idea that maybe there are disconnected or dissociated parts of the mind, maybe part that would be feeling pain and part that wouldn't be feeling pain. In the case of hypnotic amnesia, the dissociation could be between, say, a memory subsystem and the person's conscious awareness or their executive processes. Okay. Now, one of the more interesting aspects of neo-dissociation theory that I've already alluded to is what's called a hidden observer. And this is like a subsystem, a part of the mind that appears to have knowledge, information, that's not available to the subject's conscious awareness. But it can be accessed through special measures such as hypnosis or perhaps automatic writing. With the hidden observer phenomenon, the monitoring system is divided. There's one part that's feeding information to the subject's conscious awareness, but there's a second part that registers and retains information that's not available to conscious awareness. Okay. The part that's not available to conscious awareness is the hidden observer. Now, to make this idea a little clearer, I want to illustrate how it might function in a Cole-Presser task. And you can see the results from this kind of experiment on the right side of the slide. I seem to always put the figures on the right side. X-axis is the amount of time that the hand was immersed in water. Y-axis is the pain rating, okay, just like the previous graph. Now, first, subjects were given a waking sort of baseline test of their responses. They weren't hypnotized during that phase. And that's the top line, normal waking pain. Okay. So if they walked in, weren't hypnotized, stuck their hand in the bucket, they started giving their numbers. Okay. Then they were hypnotized, and they were given an analgesia suggestion. Okay. Now, in addition to the analgesia suggestion, they were also given the suggestion that a hidden part of their mind would remain aware of the true state of affairs and the true level of pain that they were experiencing. That hidden part would be able to signal the true state of affairs by pressing a key. Okay? That's the middle line here, the covert pain by automatic sort of key pressing. Their verbal responses about, oh, it feels like a 10 or a 12 or whatever. Okay, that's this line here. Okay, so this is their baseline. This is their verbal response. And this is their sort of non-conscious key pressing. See this difference here? There's some part of them that was saying, oh, this is really hurting like hell, while their verbal responses were basically saying this isn't too bad. And this difference between these two, that's the hidden observer effect. Now, it wasn't exhibited by everybody. It usually shows up in about 40 or so % of participants. Okay, but when it does show up, it's pretty striking. Done that. Okay. And it's been argued that this effect, this difference, this hidden observer effect, indicates that pain is perceived at a subconscious level during hypnotic analgesia, but there's some kind of amnesia-like barrier that prevents the conscious hypnotized mind from being aware of that information. Everybody kind of following me through?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if you look at this experiment and you're a cynic or a skeptic or just using good scientific methodology, it might occur to you that the hidden observer effect might just result from compliance. Most subjects probably figured out that when they were hypnotized, they should report less pain, and that the keep press task was supposed to indicate a more accurate measure. So maybe the subjects really figured out what the researchers wanted to see. Okay, how would you test that? Well, you'd use a simulated real methodology, and you'd see if you could get a hidden observer effect in subjects that were explicitly faking it in the simulators. And you do.
Comment for just a second.
Here.
Because aside from this, there's this other thing that we do know that goes on in kinds of social research, where there's an interaction effect between the person who's doing the research and the person who is their subject or their reporter. And they're not consciously or deliberately trying to do anything, but they're reacting in such a way that whether they realize it or not, there's this interaction that's going on between the researcher and the subject. So
absolutely, and that interaction could be subtly giving away cues as to how the researcher wants the subject to respond. Yeah, that sort of thing is typically called an experimenter effect or demand characteristic. And one of the added benefits of kind of simulated real is that you don't have that effect. Here's why you don't have that effect. If you're going to do a simulated real methodology, you need two different experimenters. You need one who's going to see the subjects initially and make the assignment of, you're going to simulate, you're going to be real. Then you need a second experimenter who's going to actually collect the data, and that second experimenter needs to be blind if the person had been assigned to the simulator or blind condition. So you can set this up as a double-blind study, or not as a single-blind study. Which addresses exactly that issue. But that issue you brought up is a very important issue, especially with something that's potentially kind of fuzzy, as hypnosis. Okay, where are we now? Okay. Data for reals is in the first couple rows. For simulators is in the bottom couple rows. Each group was divided into two subgroups, those that showed a hidden observer effect and those that didn't. After the experiment was done, there was what they called an honesty interrogation, which is like, okay, what did you really feel? And for this, the simulators had to be honest. Okay, this was after the experiment. Okay. During the experiment, it was like, what are you feeling? That's the prior to the honesty investigation. Okay, so this is when the simulators were faking it, and this is when they were being honest. And the one thing here that I want to bring to your attention is, notice the difference between during the actual session, prior to honesty, they gave it a 6. They gave their pain a 6. During the honesty, it's a 70. That's a big difference. Okay? Whereas you look at the difference between during and after for the reals, the numbers are basically identical. Okay. Now another thing to notice here is that in the reals, there were 12 subjects and half of them gave you an observer effect. Half didn't, 6 and 6. In the simulators, 9 of the 12 gave a hidden observer effect. So again, simulators were kind of over-faking it, over-simulating it, which might lead some credence to the, okay, it is a real effect, but it's more subtle, so people can't really be faking it, or everybody would be having it. You can punch holes in that if you want to, but that's kind of the best argument that's been made so far. Where are we now?
I have a question.
Yes.
We live in a society where we're somewhat repressed in our behavior in a social setting. Some of us were raised up in that society. And I'm wondering if these people who are highly hypnotized, their answers are still somewhat repressed because that's their natural behavior. Whereas the simulators, they're being told, to act as if you are. So they're removing some of their inhibition here. Sure. So that might be why the highly hypnotizable are still somewhat repressed, and the simulators are not.
Ideally, I would love to tell you something like random assignment of subjects to real or simulated group would control for that, but I can't tell you that. I can't tell you that because in many cases, the people that are reals are the ones that score higher on hypnotic susceptibility, and the studies are often kind of skewed that way. If they've got subjects that are high, they don't want to waste them in the simulator group. They want to get them in the real group.
they test them for any sort of natural opioid production?
Not that I'm aware of. But it's an empirical question. Yeah. Okay, so anyway, a social or sociological approach would suggest that maybe analgesia suggestions are working because they give particular cognitive strategies. Subjects might be able to divert their attention away from a painful stimulus. You know, go to your happy place as opposed to feeling the drill boring into your tooth. And maybe subjects' high hypnotizability are able to create stronger, more vivid, or more effective images. I mean, they do tend to score higher on imaginative involvement and absorption and so forth. These kind of images, as Alan alluded to, might become a very effective distractor from the pain. I mean, we can only pay attention to so many things at once, and if we're managing to distract ourselves with some pleasant imagery, we're not going to be as consciously processing the pain as much.
I noticed that most of these studies were done 40 to 50 years ago. Are they still doing work on this, or have they decided they found everything they can find out?
You've got a sharp eye to pick up on that. These are, I think, the cases, or the tables and the graphs and so forth that make the strongest effects. So I'm using them, but also a lot of this has not been followed up on. So the hidden observer idea, there's not been a lot of research following up on that. And some of the early studies that Hubbard did a few decades ago were still kind of the ones that people are citing. So I think it's kind of a combination of things. People are not really following up on it as much. There's been kind of a shift in medicine. Although biofeedback has gained in prominence, there is still a very strong medical model where the way to treat something is to give you a pill or cut you open. So there's not a lot of research on the medical applications.
There's a way of doing stuff, and then there's the people who are doing quietly, doing research and investigating and looking at how things really work, but they're not in the mainstream medical crowd.
We also know that distraction is a very good way to reduce perceived pain. We see this in numerous other situations. Athletes in the middle of a big game who get an injury, or soldiers on a battlefield who are injured. They can suffer what might be otherwise excruciating injuries, or at least injuries that we think would lead to excruciating pain. But they're able to ignore that because they are concerned with, the game or saving a comrade, or something. So distraction can work. But hypnosis and distraction are very different methods. Even though they may produce, in at least some cases, some similar results, it doesn't logically follow that both methods can cause the same degree of pain reduction. Therefore, they must be using the same underlying mechanism or process. That doesn't necessarily follow. It's kind of similar to the objection we noted earlier that just because a subject can fake a hidden observer, that doesn't mean all the cases of hidden observer are faked. It's probably enough on analgesia. I want to move on to post-hypnotic amnesia. Just to remind you, this occurs when a person, while under hypnotic induction, receives a suggestion that he or she will not remember some piece of information after he or she comes out of trance, at least not until the reversal cue is given. Okay. So what's going on here? Well, the information, even if they can't remember, it's probably not lost from memory. If it were really lost from memory, then they shouldn't be able to remember that information after they get the reversal cue. But if the information's in memory, before the reversal cue is given, then why don't they remember it? And we can look at different possibilities on this slide and not the next one. It could be that they don't retrieve the information, there's a retrieval failure. They try and they just can't get it. Or it might be that they retrieve the information, they just choose not to say it. They might remember it, but they don't want to tell you for whatever reason. Both that kind of retrieval failure and report failure can be either voluntary or involuntary. And when you cross voluntary and involuntary with retrieval and report failure, you get these four possibilities. The only one of these four possibilities that would be a true post-hypnotic amnesia is on the upper left, where you've got an involuntary retrieval failure. Other cases would not be a true amnesia, they'd be more like a pseudo-amnesia. They'd look like amnesia on the surface, but the reason for their not reporting would be something other than true amnesia. According to neo-dissociation theory, post-hypnotic amnesia suggests there's a dissociation, that's why they call it neo-dissociation, between consciousness and part of the memory system where the to-be-forgotten items resided. So like a dissociation between how painful you say it is versus how painful it really is. So, the inability to retrieve that real level, that real information, is involuntary in that case. Subjects might honestly try, but they can't. Okay. Anyway, there are two voluntary strategies, retrieval avoidance and faked amnesia. Okay. You could easily imagine how faking would occur. They would just pretend they couldn't do it. Okay. One way in which voluntary non-retrieval could occur is by shifting attention, using distraction. Okay. That way you don't have to try or try and fail. And it's not